What's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Picks Against the Spread special. It is week 6, and we're talking about a game that's kind of near and dear to my heart, obviously. The Chiefs taking on the Texans. Strangely enough, not a primetime game, even though this is the first game between Watson and Mahomes in the NFL. It kind of seems like it would be ripe for like a Sunday Night Football type thing, but I guess when you look at the Chiefs' schedule, if this was a primetime game, the Kansas City would have like 4 straight in primetime. So this one got relegated to the early slot for CBS, but most of the country should be seeing it. So it should be a really, really good game and honestly kind of a preview for the next 10 years in the AFC because I don't think Watson or Mahomes are going anywhere anytime soon. As for who I am betting on to win this first matchup between the two, I am taking the Texans at +4. Kansas City is favored to win by 4, but I think if the Texans don't win outright, if they even lose, I don't think it'll be by more than a field goal. So I feel really comfortable with the Texans at +4. And what it really comes down to is health. When you look at the Chiefs' injury report, they are just wrecked right now. Tyreek Hill and Hitchens, they're both game time decisions. We're not sure if they're going to play. If I were the Chiefs, I would hope that Tyreek's ready to go because, good Lord, they're going to need him. But both of them are game time decisions. We know that Watkins, Jones, and Fisher all will not play, or at least in Watkins' case, it's highly, highly likely he's not going to play. And so that means they're going to be down a dynamic receiving threat. They're going to be down their left tackle. They're going to be down their best pass rusher because Chris Jones is by far their most effective pass rusher on that team, especially with Frank Clark. He's not really done anything this year. I think he only has like 12 pressures in 5 games. I mean, there's 3 guys in Houston's front alone, Merciless, Reader, and Watt, that are more pressures than that. And Charles Omenihu, who plays like less than a third of the snaps as a rotational player, is not far behind what Frank Clark is at as a starter. He's got 9 pressures already. So, he's just not really getting it done for the price they paid for him. And so, again, when you go back to this Chiefs injury report, I mean, they are wrecked with key players. They're at a minimum going to be missing this game, but if they do play, they're not going to be fully healthy. And I'm not even talking about Mahomes yet, who has a bad ankle. He's been full participation in practice, obviously, but, he's injured that ankle twice now in the last 6 weeks. And, it's a really, really big concern for him because so much of his game is built around mobility, escaping the pocket, making off-platform throws, making plays off schedule, and kind of improvising. And it's really hard to do that when you can't run. So, again, that ankle injury is going to be a huge impact on this game, whether they shoot him up with Toradol or not. Like, he's going to be feeling it by the second half. But kind of flipping it around to Houston in terms of their injuries, they're pretty much mostly healthy. Really, the only impact player who might not suit up is Kenny Stills, who's, their number 3 receiver. He kind of took that job from QT immediately. But, they still have Hopkins and Fuller and Kiki QT as receiving threats, which is a pretty dynamic receiving core anyway. So it's not the end of the world if he doesn't play. He also should be a game time decision. But, if he suits up, I mean, that means Houston's got 4 deep in terms of dynamic receiving threats that can create big plays on any given snap. So, again, Houston's mostly healthy, and the injuries they do have are not that big of a deal. They're pretty deep. And speaking of that Texans offense, that's the one aspect of Houston that I'm not worried about. Their offensive line is finally healthy. And in the 2 games where that kind of core starting 5 is played together, meaning Larry Tunsil at left tackle, Max Sharping at left guard, Nick Martin at center, Fulton at right guard, and Titus Howard at right tackle. In the 2 games that starting 5 has been together, which were at the Chargers, which I was at that game, and they were phenomenal, and then hosting Atlanta. In those 2 games, Deshaun has passed for 79% completions, an average of 388 yards per game, an average of 4 touchdowns per game, no interceptions, an average quarterback rating of 147.1. He's only average taking 1 sack per game. And the Falcons in particular last week, the offensive line only allowed 4 pressures the entire game because they dominated up front. And Deshaun got the ball out in, 2.43 seconds on average. which was among the top 6 in the whole league last week. That's down from his usual average of 2.82, which is 29th. So they really made an effort to get the ball out quick. They made an effort to kind of help out the offensive line by not having Deshaun hold the ball in these long developing passing plays for almost 3 seconds. And the offense dominated as a result. I mean, it was the best I've seen this Texans offense look since probably they hung 57 on the Titans back in 2017. And again, it was just a truly dominant performance. So I'm really not worried about the Texans scoring points. What I am worried about is, at least as a Texans fan, I'm worried about how they're going to stop the Chiefs from scoring points. You know, I know the common trope this week is, oh, you just play man coverage, that shuts them down. But the Texans don't really have the personnel to play man coverage against this team. They don't have the speed to do it at pretty much every position. You know, when it comes to like linebackers covering Travis Kelce, Kelce's gone for at least 98 yards in literally 3 of the last 4 games he's played against these Houston linebackers, because they've never had the personnel to handle him man-to-man, or even in zone, really. You know, none of their corners are fast enough to keep up with Tyreek Hill if he plays, or Mecole Hardman, who's almost as fast. You know, they don't have any corners that can keep up with 4.3 speed, no matter which one of them's on the field. And, you know, the only safety that I realistically trust to cover anyone in space, whether it's Kelce, any of the running backs, you know, bracketing people downfield, that's going to be Reed, and he's most likely going to be in the deep middle and not near the line of scrimmage. So really, the secondary is a huge concern, especially in the first 10 to 15 yards. I don't think they can line up man-to-man and expect this defense to dominate like the Colts did last week. They just don't have the dudes to do that. What they do have the personnel to do is rush the passer and blitz the hell out of Mahomes to kind of get him on the ground before he can hurt them down the field if they do play man coverage. I don't know what they're going to play. But, you know, that's what they have, is a defensive line that can punish Kansas City before they punish Houston. And with Watt and Merciless and Reeder, like I mentioned before, all having phenomenal years rushing the passer. McKinney's a good blitzer. Cunningham's a good blitzer. They're both great at stopping the run inside. You know, this front seven is just nasty, both inside and outside. And Mitchell Schwartz can't block everyone at once. He's a great right tackle, but he's pretty much the only offensive lineman I trust on that team right now. And Houston has 4 other guys that also need attention. And I think that's really the game plan that the Texans need to use here, is just bring a lot of pressure, get to Pat before he can get them, and kind of compress every lane in that pocket at once so that he can't escape. Because that's really what this Chiefs offense is kind of built around, in a way, is Pat Mahomes' mobility. You know, I've broken down the Chiefs offense several times. I even did it again this season a couple weeks ago with that Pat Mahomes video. And when you look at this Chiefs offense, they do 3 things really well. They hit you with speed, they hit you with deception, and they hit you with improvisation. The speed element kind of speaks for itself, you know, with Tyreek and Mecole and you know, Travis Kelce runs like a deer for a tight end. Like, they're fast everywhere. So that's kind of speaks for itself, like I said. The deception element, you know, that's really their screen game and all of their kind of really creative, long developing route concepts down the field that force defenses into broken coverages when they do play zone. You know, it's drawing safeties one way, sneaking a receiver behind them the other way. You know, in the first, 3 weeks of the season before they ran into Detroit, a lot of teams were playing zone against them to keep everything in front of them. But with all the air raid concepts that have been integrated into this KC offense, which I talked about that also a little bit when I did the Kyler Murray breakdown before the draft. They use these air raid concepts to turn zone coverages into essentially man-to-man opportunities, and they'll use that to create leverage advantages. They'll break coverages. They'll force people out of their spots, and it just absolutely torches people. We saw that against Baltimore week 2 or 3. You know, they even got Earl Thomas to jump out of position. Like, that's just what this defense does. And so that's the deception element. And then, you know, the improvisation element is when Pat gets outside the pocket when a play doesn't work and he makes something happen that wasn't in the playbook. You know, they do that really, really well every single week. And that's a big reason why the Colts dominated that offense, is because they took away all of those things at the same time. Pat's ankle was hurt, obviously, so he wasn't as mobile. He couldn't create as easily on broken plays as he normally does, where he kind of, you know, runs one way, throws back the other way, does all these crazy-ass throws. if you can't escape and buy the time to create those opportunities, you just can't make those throws. So that was a huge factor in that game. And, they played man coverage, which was the big talking point this week on all the sports shows was, oh, man totally shuts them down. The reason why they played man wasn't because they can just cover all these receivers. There's so much speed, it's hard to really cover them on every single snap. But they played man to eliminate the risk of deception. It wasn't because they can match up with speed. It's because we don't want to get our safeties moved out of position by their route concepts. Because they don't run a whole lot of man-breaking route concepts. A lot of it is like clear-out concepts that aren't as good against man but are as good against zone. And with the Colts, they played so much zone in the first 4 weeks of the season that KC went into that game with a game plan of a whole bunch of zone beaters. They didn't have a whole lot of man beaters. So that was a big part of it. Is the Colts kind of switched up their entire defensive philosophy just for that game. But again, they played man to eliminate the risk of deception, because when you play man, you don't really allow yourself to be moved out of position by a quarterback's eyes. You're not moving yourself out of, speaking about the safeties, you're not moving yourself out of position to bracket the wrong guy. Like it's a really good way to just stay in your right spot and do your job. It's a big reason why the Patriots play a whole lot of man coverage. The job is simplified. It's take that guy, run with him, don't give up a catch. So that's why man coverage is good against Kansas City, because they rely so much on deception, and you can't really deceive man coverage. And then third, they neutralized that speed, which, speed is good against man, but they neutralized it by getting to Pat faster with their defensive line than Pat could get them by throwing it down the field to the receivers as they separated. That's the game plan. It's not just about playing man. It's about keeping Mahomes in the pocket, getting him on the ground, limiting his escapes, so that by the time his receivers that run 4-3 to 4-5 all get open down the field, he's already on the ground. That is really the game plan here. So, that's what I expect Houston to attempt to do. I'm not saying they're going to be great at it, because their secondary is not super good, but I think they're going to at least try it. The offense is going to take care of itself. Like I said, I'm not worried about them at all. We all know that Deshaun Watson, he always shows up in a big moment in a big game, but the defense, if they can execute that plan, this is a very winnable game. Even if they can just be decent with that game plan, this is a winnable game. They just have to not give up like 35 points, and they'll be okay. The Chiefs are banged up, like I mentioned. Neither their offensive line or their defensive line has played well in the last couple weeks. And there is now a semi-blueprint out there for how they can be beat. I'm not saying that they will be beat, obviously, but I think the chance is good enough here to justify a little bet on this game that's paying out almost 2-1 if you hit on it. So, naturally, I'm going to be betting on Houston just because the payout's pretty good for a scenario that I think is highly plausible. And the over-under is only 56, which honestly isn't as high as I would have expected it to be. You only need a score of what is my math, 30 to 27 to beat that, to get it to 57. And with Deshaun Watson on the field against Pat Mahomes, of all people, I think that's worth a bet. That could be broken by the third quarter if both quarterbacks are hot. So, overall, I think the Texans have a good chance of pulling out a win here. And believe me, before the season, even as a Texans fan, I never would have said that. I had this marked down as a loss since the day the schedule came out. But with all of Kansas City's injuries, with Mahomes being hobbled, with Frank Clark not even coming close to being worth his big price tag so far, with Chris Jones not there to pick up the slack, and with Houston's offense finally clicking somehow with a much improved offensive line, I kind of like Houston to win this. It's not going to be easy, obviously, but it's very, very doable because everything is coming together for them in this game. And I think it's doable enough to the point where I'm betting on them all the way, both straight up and with the spread, and I'm betting the over, because I really like the potential payout for a relatively secure bet. Not a guaranteed bet, because it's Kansas City, but if you're going to bet on a road underdog, this is a pretty good one to bet on. So, that'll wrap it up for me. And again, as always, if you're thinking about placing a bet on this game yourself, just head on over to our season-long sponsor, MyBookie, at the link in the description below to get a huge 100% sign-up bonus with promo code Brett. that will double your potential bankroll to use on these bets this season, which of course can vastly increase your earnings if you win on those bets that you use that bonus deposit on. Or if you lose on those bets, it can also help you out because you didn't actually lose any of your own money, you just lost the house money they gave you. So either way, whether you win or lose, it's a great deal. I highly recommend taking advantage of it, especially if you're going to be betting on these games anyway. You might as well get the bonus. So again, you can find that in the link in the description below with promo code Brett. And as for me, I will be back next week with another full Film Room episode. If you haven't watched this week's on the Atlanta Falcons defense, go check that out. A lot of interesting stuff in there. Unless you're a Falcons fan, in which case I recommend you stay far, far away from it for your own sanity because it gets pretty dark. But yeah, I think you guys are going to really like what I've got coming up next week. It's a little bit more positive, and I'll have that out in 4 or 5 days-ish. But yeah, until then, later.